The receipt is already on the table before the customer reaches for it. Not handed over with ceremony, not discussed. Just placed slightly off to the side, visible, but not intrusive. The server steps back, not leaving entirely, but creating a small pocket of distance. In that moment, nothing is said, but a sequence has already been set in motion. The customer glances down, not immediately. There is often a pause, conversation continues, a sip of a drink, a quick look at a phone. But eventually, attention shifts to the receipt. The numbers are scanned quickly, almost automatically. Then the eyes move to a blank line or a suggested percentage. This is where the interaction begins to change. No one explains what to do next. There are no instructions, but the situation carries a structure that both sides seem to recognize. The customer does not usually ask, "What is expected here?" The server does not say, "Please leave this amount." Instead, both adjust their behavior around an expectation that is not explicitly stated. In many cases, the customer's decision is not calculated from scratch. It is shaped by a set of familiar reference points: 15%, 18%, 20%. These numbers appear so frequently that they begin to function less like options and more like defaults. The act of choosing becomes less about evaluating service quality in detail and more about selecting from a narrow range that feels socially acceptable. This reduces the effort required to decide. Rather than analyzing every aspect of the interaction: how quickly the food arrived, how often the server checked in, whether the tone was friendly, the customer often relies on a shortcut. A quick impression is translated into a small adjustment. Slightly above, slightly below, or exactly at a familiar percentage. The decision happens quickly, often in a few seconds. At the same time, the presence of tipping introduces a layer of uncertainty into the interaction. Before the bill even arrives, both sides are already adjusting to it. A server approaching a table may not know how this particular interaction will end. The outcome is not fixed. It depends on a series of small moments: eye contact, timing, responsiveness, tone. Each of these can influence the final amount, but none of them guarantees a specific result. Because of this, behavior tends to become slightly more attentive, slightly more adaptive, not dramatically so, but enough to be noticeable. For example, a server might adjust how often they check in based on subtle signals. If a table appears to want privacy, they step back. If the table seems uncertain, they approach more frequently. These adjustments are not always conscious decisions. Over time, they become patterns, ways of navigating uncertainty. The customer, on the other hand, is also responding to the same structure. Even before the receipt arrives, there is often an awareness that the interaction is being evaluated. This does not necessarily lead to deliberate judgment, but it shapes attention. Small details: tone of voice, speed of service, perceived effort become more noticeable because they may later be translated into a number. This creates a kind of feedback loop. The server adjusts behavior in anticipation of a tip. The customer observes behavior with the knowledge that a tip will be given. Each side is responding not only to the present moment, but to a future evaluation that has not yet happened. In this way, the interaction is stretched across time. It is not just a sequence of service events followed by payment. It is a continuous process where the expectation of tipping influences behavior from the beginning, even before any money is exchanged. In some situations, this leads to subtle forms of signaling. A server might emphasize certain actions: checking in at the right moment, offering recommendations, remembering preferences, not because they are strictly necessary, but because they communicate attentiveness. These actions function as signals of effort. The customer, in turn, interprets these signals, not always explicitly, but as part of an overall impression. The question is not usually, was this action worth a specific amount? But rather, did this feel attentive enough? The evaluation is holistic, compressed into a general sense of satisfaction. This compression is important. It allows a complex interaction to be reduced to a single number. Without this simplification, the decision would require much more effort. Instead, the mind relies on patterns, familiar percentages, general impressions, social expectations. Social expectations play a particularly strong role here. In many environments, tipping is not just a personal choice but a shared norm. Even if no one is watching, there is an awareness of what others typically do. This awareness can influence behavior in subtle ways. For example, a customer dining alone may still follow the same tipping pattern they would use in a group setting. The presence of a norm reduces the need to justify the decision internally. It provides a reference point that feels stable. At the same time, deviations from this norm can create a sense of discomfort. Leaving significantly less than the expected amount often requires a reason, even if that reason is not expressed out loud. The customer may mentally review the interaction, looking for justification. If none is found, the lower amount can feel harder to commit to. This suggests that tipping is not only about evaluating service, but also about maintaining alignment with a shared standard. The server is aware of this as well. Over time, patterns emerge. Certain behaviors are more likely to lead to outcomes within a predictable range. While the exact amount may vary, the overall distribution tends to be stable. This stability allows the server to develop expectations not for any single interaction, but for the general flow of outcomes across many interactions. This reduces uncertainty at a broader level, even if individual moments remain unpredictable. Interestingly, the structure of tipping also affects how interactions end. Unlike fixed-price transactions, where the conclusion is clear, the bill is paid, and the interaction is over, tipping introduces an additional step. The moment of payment is not just a transfer of money, but a final evaluation. This can create a slight delay. The customer may linger for a moment after placing the tip, or leave quickly without drawing attention to it. The server may wait before collecting the receipt, giving the customer space. These small adjustments help manage the transition from interaction to closure. The end of the interaction is not abrupt. It is softened. In some cases, the presence of tipping can even influence how earlier moments are remembered. A slightly delayed order might be interpreted differently if the overall experience feels attentive. A brief lapse in service may be overlooked if the final impression is positive. The evaluation is not strictly cumulative. It is shaped by how the interaction is framed at the end. This suggests that tipping is not just a response to behavior, but part of a system that organizes how behavior is perceived. It creates a structure where certain moments carry more weight, where impressions are consolidated, and where decisions are guided by familiar patterns. At the same time, the system remains flexible. There is no fixed rule that dictates exactly how much should be given in every situation. The range is narrow, but not rigid. This allows for variation, which, in turn, allows the system to adapt to different contexts. A busy restaurant, a quiet cafe, a late-night service each may lead to slightly different expectations. Even within the same general framework, both sides navigate this flexibility using cues. The customer looks for signals of effort, attentiveness, and timing. The server looks for signals of satisfaction, engagement, and responsiveness. These signals are not always clear, but over time, they become easier to interpret. This mutual adjustment is continuous. It does not stop at the moment of tipping. It shapes how future interactions are approached. A server who experiences consistent patterns may refine their behavior. A customer who becomes familiar with the system may rely even more on shortcuts. The system reinforces itself through repetition. And yet, in each individual moment, it still feels open. The receipt is placed on the table. The numbers are scanned. A decision is made, often quickly, often quietly. The server returns, or waits, or moves on to another table. Nothing is explicitly negotiated. Nothing is formally agreed upon. But the interaction has already followed a structure that both sides recognize, even if it is never fully articulated. And as the table is cleared and reset for the next customer, the same sequence becomes possible. Again, slightly different, shaped by new conditions, but still guided by the same underlying pattern.